And there I am. I am going to be reading from my book again. Not that one. All right. The final chapter reading for this week from The Magic Paintbrush, my first novel. Hi, I'm J.E. Krieger, author of the books of 9 and 10 Penance. And I have been reading chapter by chapter my first novel in hopes that you, the listener, will go out and purchase a copy or go give it a shot on Kindle Reads. Yeah, there we go. And at this one and, hold on, let me get this. The Magic Paintbrush and Book 2, The Greatest Storm, are on Kindle Reads right now for $2.99. Woo. $2.99. You can check out the back cover. I guess you can't see it that well. Whoa, there we go. Anyways, those two books are on. This one's a romantic comedy about two lovers separated by an ocean, and Allison White goes searching for her boyfriend who's lost on an island. And she runs into a mermaid and some mermen who lost their legs because of the mermaid. And she lets loose an evil tree serpent to try and stop her from finding true love. Anyways, I hope you check that out, but you can check out my other videos on that one. Because tonight, we will be reading from the story about the boy trapped in a painting, The Magic Paintbrush, and I did the cover art. And I'm back indoors again. Here we go. I got some more art for you to view. Here we go. Piece of art I made. Hope you enjoy it. I thought that would be fun to look at while I'm reading from this book. But anyways, to recap, because this is the end of the week, let's see, for this week, Fragonard, what did he do this week? Fragonard learned how to paint, or was that last? Oh yeah, that's right. So this week, Fragonard painted the kingdom from rags to riches, and then he had to fight back a 10-foot tall rhododendron because he accidentally brought the garden to life, and the butterfly flowers tried to eat him, which was not fun. But he was able to tame the garden. And in the last chapter, the king's portrait, Fragonard's father fell ill, and it didn't seem like he was going to make it. So Botticelli painted Fragonard's father onto the face of a canvas. And by the end of the chapter, it was not looking good. They really weren't sure what to do in this situation. He's trapped in a painting now, and they don't know how to paint him back to health. But he's fine for the time being. He's stuck inside a painting. So, and in this chapter, let's see here. We'll be reading, this is called, get to the chapter here, The Madness of King Fragonard. And so that's where we're at this week. And I'll return next week, Monday, and continue on with the chapter readings. So, and then, tomorrow I'm going to, probably about the same time, doing talk about writing, authentic street advice from a writer. All right, well, I'll get into the chapter reading. And like I said, where we left off, Fragonard's father was trapped inside a painting, or rather painted onto the face of a canvas to save his life. And so here we go, The Madness of King Fragonard. And this is from the book, The Magic Paintbrush. All right. At the end of the week, I checked in on my father to see if Botticelli had any luck painting him back to health. To my utter joy, before I could even make it down the hallway, he opened his chamber doors. I rushed to his side and he rasped my hair. He said he'd never felt better. His cheeks were full of color and merriment, and best of all, he no longer had a persistent cough. I couldn't believe it. Botticelli's magic had not only saved him, but reinvigorated him as well. Unfortunately, our celebrations were cut short. My father had some terrible news. Botticelli slowly began to suffer from the same illness as him and had to paint himself onto the canvas. It was a shame. He worked so hard to save my father's life. I asked to speak with him, to at least thank him for all that he'd sacrificed, but my father wouldn't allow it. He feared I'd catch the same horrible illness, and I, too, would have to be painted onto a canvas. I asked if there was anything I could do. I felt I owed my life to him. He said, in fact, there was. Botticelli proclaimed I was the only one with the skill and the talent who could paint him back to health. I lost my bookmark. But at first I had to prove my worth to him as a painter and a daydreamer. Then and only then would I be allowed to see my friend. Over the next few weeks, I spent every waking hour honing in on my craft. I'd take my work to my father and he would show it to Botticelli for his critique. I never received any praise or gratitude for my efforts. He would just point out the faults and the flaws, denoting the line work and the use of color in my palette. I was told it was too flowery for his taste, lending towards the abstract, that he needed absolute realism and nothing less would suffice. Try as I may, there was no pleasing him, and to be honest, I didn't feel I could produce the art he wanted anyways. One night after dinner in the main hall, he reviewed the best of my paintings. I remember we were looking over a piece entitled The Bolt, and it clearly didn't appease his tastes. He stood in front of the painting and said, "You call this art? It's awful. You'll never achieve greatness at this rate. I might as well send you back out to the fields and have you stick with what you're really good at." "I'm trying, Father, but it's difficult when I don't even know what he wants from me." My father rubbed his hand on his chin and said, "Son, all is relying on you. You've shown improvement lately, but you could do better." I asked again to speak with Botticelli to try and get some direction. My father said his illness was still highly contagious. It took the best out of him, and he couldn't even imagine what it would do to me. "You're just going to have to double your efforts. If you don't, he'll become nothing more than a memory fading in the sun on a wall in this castle." "It's just that I'm frustrated. I can't concentrate anymore, Father. It's becoming difficult to even pick up a brush." I was in shock by his response. I'd never seen him lose his temper so abruptly. He slammed his fist down on the table as hard as he could and erupted at me with great passion. "So this is how you repay a debt of gratitude. I will not tolerate a son who does not abide by my wishes. From now on, you'll have to spend your nights outdoors sleeping on Botticelli's bed of dreams. Maybe, after a few nights spent under the stars, you'll find that spark of inspiration to appease me." He then grabbed me by the collar and promptly escorted me to the gates and told me not to come back until I chose to live under his thumb. Over the next few weeks, I slept under the shade of the tree atop the 2 hills where Botticelli used to dream. I would wake up bright and early and look out into the empty voids of our fields until the sun went down. I stared at the stars every night, waiting for inspiration to strike, but it just wasn't happening. Whether Botticelli was ill or not, lying about staring at the same stars every night wasn't going to solve anything. I stopped by Grant Wood's farm before going on the long walk back home. I was hoping he could offer me some advice on the matter. I arrived just as he was packing up the last of his belongings on a cart. I asked if he was planning on taking a trip. It appeared as if he wouldn't be returning anytime soon. He thought I already knew. My father showed up early in the morning, before sunrise, and told him to pack up his things and leave. His farm was to be turned over by the end of the day, so his land could be presented to Botticelli as a gift for saving my father's life. I thought this just couldn't be. I promised I would talk with my father and sort this out, but he wouldn't have it. The last thing Grantwood told me I'll never forget. He said I was a hard worker, not to ever lose that side of me, and to always remember my father the way he once was. He then pulled on the reins of his horse and rode away, shaking his head. I couldn't believe he was leaving, nor that my father would treat him so poorly. On the walk through the countryside, I noticed the weeds had grown in thick. No one was left to tend to them anymore. Where had they gone, the farmers and the field hands? I asked myself this mysterious question. The gates to the village walls were swaying open. Landseer happened to be right outside. He was fastening the clasp on his horse, tying it down against the strong current of the wind. He had a cartload of paint. I nodded hello and asked what he was doing with all of it. He said he was doing his job, of course, under the orders of my father, and bringing it to the new castle. New castle? I asked him. He pointed to the center of town and gruffly said, "It's right over there. Take a look for yourself. Enstrom and his daughter live there now, as the king's royal bakers." I looked down the main road in disbelief. The castle had drastically changed in just a few short weeks, morphed into a monstrosity of masonry. The bell tower casted this menacing shadow over the people's homes. Looking at it from the right angle made it appear as if it almost reached the clouds in the sky. This is what my father was up to, why he didn't want me around. It was obvious to me then. He was borrowing the brush without Botticelli's consent and using it to paint lavish things he didn't need like he did before. Landseer told me those showing even the slightest sign of creativity were immediately imprisoned without question, and all newcomers were banished until further notice. There was something off about him, the way he carried himself, Landseer proclaimed. His mannerisms, as if he wasn't the same man. I knew I had to get inside the castle and take back control of the brush. I couldn't allow my father to continue misusing it. Landseer gladly offered to hide me in his cart and sneak me inside. I climbed aboard and off we went to the new castle. My father waved Landseer in and told him to unload the paint in the doorway. I began searching for Botticelli's portrait. The castle had changed so much since the last time I was there. The ceilings were higher and bowed, with contouring edges leading into the empty spaces. At least one of my paintings hung on every wall, next to one of Botticelli's. In the main hall, I'd found a lavish feast laid out. It had been a while since I'd eaten a good meal, so I thought I'd grab myself something to eat. I heard my father waking up from a nap. I almost didn't recognize him. He was sitting at the head of the table in the dark. The shadows in the room consumed his face with the features of an aging old man, mournful of the day's long agenda. I wondered if his illness had returned. He leaned forward, barely wiping the crumbs off his lips as he spoke with a mouthful of bread. "My son, I'm surprised to see you so soon. I've had such a hard and tiring week. Come in and sit down. Let's regale on your time spent under the stars." I spouted back, "I've just returned from Grantwood's farm. I'd like to talk about that with you if you don't mind." "And how is my old friend doing? Is it true? Did you really give his land to Botticelli?" My father glared at me in suspicion. "It's the least I could do to show my gratitude toward the man who saved my life, but if you must know, Grantwood, that ornery old goose, he was happy to give up his farm. Why? What exactly did he tell you?" "He told me you took it out from under him, and he seemed pretty sincere about it. I also ran into Landseer. He said you've requested all the paint in the kingdom." "Why, yes, of course I have. What's there to explain? Botticelli has made a few requests. All I can do is humbly reply. We own that much, don't we?" "I'll agree with you, Father. We do owe him a debt of gratitude. But what does outlawing creativity and banishing newcomers have anything to do with it?" "Botticelli needs you to be at your best, and I can't have your creativity stifled by others." Not when the man who saved my life is depending on it. My father then stuck his thumb in a cherry pie and wiped it on his lips. Now please sit down and enjoy this meal with me. Enstrom baked you a pie. I won't sit down and stuff my face. Whoa. Well, there's a wolf's head. I won't sit down and stuff my face, not while the people must live under your tyrannical rule. Oh, quit being so difficult about things. Your friend Botticelli has given me an extension to my life, and I shan't not waste it, neither should you. Oh, geez, hold on. Well, there's the Danish scene. It's an old Danish street. We'll look at that for a while. Now, where was I? My father then stood up and said if I continued undermining his authority, he would not have me rule by his side. So I asked who would rule by his side, if not his only son. He curled his lips together and let out a strong grumble. You may sit wherever you like, so long as it is not on my throne. My father stuck his hand in the whole pie and scarfed down the rest. He then told me to go to my room and he would deal with me later on. I left, but where was my room? The only thing I could think of was finding Botticelli and his magic brush. Then maybe I could talk some sense into him. When I turned the corner, I discovered an explosion of artistic dreams. Magical murals painted onto the walls of a curved hallway snaking deep into the castle. The fields were beautifully captured in the oils. You could see from one season to the next at a glance. I could feel the warm summer breeze blowing over my face on one side of the wall and the icy winter chill on the other. The impasto moved with the wind, cascading over the landscape. The clouds parasailed into the distant blue voids. Then I heard a loud, thunderous roar, followed by violent flashes of light. The hallway grew dark for a moment, then a strong gust of wind blew in a pile of leaves that scattered further into this labyrinth of surreal imagery. There was a storm brewing down the way. I was certain of it. At the end of the hall was a painting of a room. Though not particularly interesting, I noticed something visually suspicious. There was a doorway left open, peering into a room within a room within a room. Only a master craftsman could think of something like this. Though I couldn't believe it, in my heart, I knew all along. When I opened the last door in the painting, I discovered to my astonishment it was not Botticelli's portrait hanging on the wall, but my father's, and he remained quite ill. He told me about Botticelli's lies, how he had imprisoned him in the portrait and spent a whole week painting himself in his image. He planned on taking over and ruling our kingdom with me by his side as apprentice to his magic. I found the box containing the paintbrush and vowed to my father I would make him pay for what he had done. Hold on a second here. There we go. Now we can still look at this drawing I did. Botticelli, the painter, entered the room with a crooked smile wiped across my father's face. I picked up the brush and threatened to paint him out of existence if he did not release my father from the canvas. He stood there laughing loudly and arrogantly at my words. So I dipped the brush in paint and made good on my threat. But nothing happened. He took it right out of my grasp, then wiped my father's face from his own, whiskers and all, and ordered that I do as he wishes, or suffer from the wrath of his artistic thoughts. I ran out of the castle and down the main road of town, headed straight for the gates to our once glorious fields. By the time I reached his two fabled hills, the sun had nearly vanished. I climbed my way to the top and nestled in with my back propped up against the tree. Hours later I woke. The stars were all out, and yet not one could be seen twinkling in an unnatural way. I wondered if he even cared to bother with me, for it appeared he had what he wanted all along, our once hard-working kingdom under his majestic painter's thumb. I sat there for the longest time, toiling over how easily I'd been deceived. He took everything from me the moment he laid that first stroke on the canvas, condemning my father to such a horrible fate. Where was I? I was naive to think all my problems could be solved so easily. Then I saw a pitchfork and a shovel lying there down below in the fields. I must have forgotten it there last fall, after Botticelli painted all the hard work away. It wasn't much to help, but it was something, no matter how small it was. I walked down to retrieve them when I noticed the moon. It was acting peculiar, pulsating, forming purple rings around the edges. I picked up the shovel and pulled the pitchfork out of the ground. Then I walked over to the first hill. By then, the entire landscape was covered in this mystical fog. I could barely see more than a few yards, so I climbed my way to the top to get a better view of what was going on. There was a cyclone swirling in the fields, picking up everything it could along the way. It was what I worked so hard for over the years. Turnips, carrots, green and red onions, squashes of all shapes and sizes, and potatoes with 1,000 dead eyes. Oh my. I picked up the shovel and swatted a turnip. Then I diced a carrot in two with the edge of my shovel. No matter how many came at me, I made sure to eat all of my vegetables. I threw that line in there for myself. I do not apologize for it. Anyways, and this one as well. Now that my foes from the fields had been diced, sliced, and planted firmly in the dirt from whence they grew, I picked up an onion and took a hearty bite without so much as shedding a tear. I do not apologize for that line. The hill in front of me then began to sink. I looked down below. The fields were saturated in a black, oily mess, devouring the two hills. It was a matter of time before I sank along with it, so I hopped aboard the tree stump and cast off. Botticelli appeared out of the fog. He was riding atop a horse with the belly of a fish, directing an army of these fire-breathing beasts with brush in hand. He was humming off-key, a trumpeting score to a march of victory. I scowled at such a tune. But he'd bested me, and there was nothing I could do but watch as he made his dreadful approach. What was left of the two hills he soaked up into his brush. The horses vanished, as if they were nothing more than a dream. The land returned back to normal and became a field once again for him to choose how he played. The only thing left was the vegetables I ate scattered across the open landscape, and his horse, which promptly sprouted legs. The walk home was humiliating for a prince who once worked hard for his efforts. I was brought to the dungeon and chained to a wall with just a sliver of light to see. There in the opposite corner of my cell was a man sitting humbly in defeat. When he turned his head toward the light, I was in shock by what I saw. His face, it lacked distinguishing features, as if they'd been completely wiped clean. Botticelli must have painted them away, erasing any remnants of this man's existence. It left me horrified to think, I wonder if this is what he had in store for me. The next night, Botticelli returned to my cell to ask that I indulge in his dreams. Young Aidan, prince and heir to a pile of dirt, I was growing rather tired of wearing your father's wrinkled face, earned from precious years he so foolishly wasted in the fields. Now that you know the truth, I'll give you a choice. This could all be ours one day, a dream to manipulate together, me as the master and you as my apprentice. Well, what do you say? It would be just that, Botticelli, a dream I care not to indulge in. Your time in the fields, daydreaming night after night. Don't tell me you didn't want more. I only wanted one thing, and you've taken that from me. Very well, then live in the squalor and rot in this cell with your new friend. Maybe after the leaves have fallen and the sight of this man has haunted you long enough, you will change your answer. Botticelli was just about to leave when I stuck a toting blow to his ego. Is this how you pay back my father's generosity? He smirked discourteously at my words. To show I am generous? Here is the last loaf of bread Enstrom baked before I ordered his imprisonment. for plotting against me, Jared Botticelli, the new king of the castle. I spent the next month and a half chained to that wall with the words he left me with to ponder on. The last loaf of bread Enstrom baked, and my new friend who couldn't hear me sob nightly, nor utter a single word to help console me through the darkest time in my life. Then one night, as I was sobbing on as usual, the wall next to me started to crumble. When it gave way, a man wearing a cloak stepped out and stood over me. He removed his hood to reveal a badly scarred and mangled face. Though his eyes were out of proportion and his lips were bent, he looked directly at me when he spoke. I am Ethan Bourdon of Italy, and I carry with the second brush in hopes that you, Prince Aidan of the Kingdom of Fragonard, possess the skills necessary to defeat Botticelli and become my father's victor. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, nor that there would ever be hope I would get a chance to duel with Botticelli. But it was true, and this time I might stand a chance in defeating him with a brush of my own. I thought to myself I would not let him mock me or make a fool of my skill so easily. But alas, it was all a dream. Bourdon only carried a little paint with him, not enough to defeat his magic, but perhaps enough to escape my cell and find where he had hidden the kingdom's paint. Then I could make a painter's palette of my own. I asked Bourdon how he knew where to find me. He said he'd just arrived from a long voyage at sea in search of Botticelli and had heard of my story from a passing villager. I asked that he used the last of his paint to remove my chains, so that I may get that chance to avenge our fathers. He said first I had to listen to his tale, for he knew much about the brush and Botticelli's deceitful ways that would help me better understand what I must now face. And this, young Stefan, is the story that he told me. Okay, there we go. That's the end of that chapter. And I will return next week, Monday, and I shall read Dancers in Blue. That's the next chapter. And in that chapter, we go back to the museum. Flash forward. Here's the book. Flash forward 500 years back to the museum, and we'll hear Fragonard's thoughts, or we'll hear Stefan Vermeer's thoughts on Fragonard's story. So thank you guys for listening along. Things have certainly taken a turn, and next week, those are certainly some fun chapters that I had writing. Some of my favorite chapters there, so things will end up getting quite interesting. And we'll get to meet a new man. I don't want to give it away, but Monday we're going to meet a whole new character. It should be fun. But thanks for listening. The rest of the chapter readings are up on my channel. If you want to catch up and get to chapter 1 up to where we are now, they're under the playlist chapter readings. So yeah, and it's up on Amazon Kindle right now for $2.99, and the Kindle version has all the artwork in it that I couldn't put in the book. So yeah, and tomorrow, hopefully around the same time, 9 o'clock, I'll do a talk on writing. So yeah, thanks for listening. I think I'm going to start doing these videos at 9 o'clock now. Seems to be a nice even time. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your night.